power is no guarantee of strength, wisdom, rationality, justice. That the guy who rules the world may actually be easily ruled by his subordinates. So it's a cautionary tale for us to keep in mind anytime we're engaging with the powers of government. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces, giving orders to destroy, to kill, to annihilate. A lot of instances. All Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by proclamation, calling on all faithfuls to be ready for that day. The couriers went quickly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. Now that they're eating and drinking, and if you paid attention, there are banquets and feasts and meals repeated in this Esther story. Because meals are supposed to be opportunities for fellowship and hospitality. We celebrate every week an open table in which we symbolize that we are all equal, that we are all in connection with one another, that we are all children of God. But this table is the table of the oppressor, the persecutor. And it's a story we have heard before. There is no way for us to read the story of Esther apart from seeing it as one in a long history of anti-Semitic violence. The expulsion of the Jews in the late medieval period, the pogroms of Central and Eastern Europe, the Holocaust, and even the anti-Semitism here in Oklahoma City just last week. We have heard this story before, and we are afraid that we will hear this story again. Well, Mordecai and all the Jews were fasting, weeping, and lamenting. And with emissaries going back and forth between them, Esther and Mordecai begin to discuss the situation. Mordecai implores Esther to entreat the king on behalf of the people. But Esther warns him that she has not been called to visit the king in 30 days, and that she cannot just walk in uninvited. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone, may that person live. Well, in response to this, Mordecai sends back this message. Do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. Well, these are probably the most famous words in the book of Esther. They tell us that living in the context of imperial power, in the context of a society which does not match one's ethics, that we humans become faced often with decisions. And sometimes we are forced to disobey. What is called for is the courage to stand up to power. Now, one important thing to note is that the book of Esther never mentions God. It has been a problem for religious people throughout the centuries. In fact, there were later editions of the book of Esther that added a great deal of religious content to the story. But the version in the Hebrew and Protestant Bibles never mentions God. God is conspicuously absent. Now, commentators have taken this to mean a handful of things. But I find it actually to be very encouraging. And here's why. So often the stories of liberation in the Bible are accompanied with some spectacular sign of wonder, like the parting of the Red Sea at the Exodus, or by some powerful mystical vision. But that's not our experience. Most of us seeking and hoping for and working for liberation on a day-to-day basis do not see dramatic signs and wonders. I do what I do in advocating for equality, justice, and peace because of my belief in the reign of God and my desire to be a disciple of Jesus. But I don't have mystical visions. I haven't seen spectacular signs and wonders. Without empirical evidence, though, I keep working. And the book of Esther is that kind of story. God doesn't show up and fix everything in this story. The people themselves have to take action if they're going to be saved. Now they hope that their action will result in change, but they have no guarantee that it will. In fact, they've got plenty of room to doubt that it will, which is why what Esther does is a leap of faith. So Esther then is a model to all of us about how we can live out our discipleship with courage, taking the risk, having hope and faith, and not always sure that what we will do will work, but just trusting that it will. But first she has to prepare. And she doesn't just prepare alone. She calls for the entire community to surround her. Go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. And after that I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Well, on the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace opposite the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne inside the palace, opposite to the entrance to the palace. And as soon as he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won his favor. And he held out to her the golden scepter that was in his hand. And then Esther approached and touched the top of the scepter. And the king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given you, even to the half of my people." And then Esther said, "If it please the king, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet that I prepared for the king." And so Esther's leap of faith, her action pays off. She receives her audience with the king. She does not get killed. And once again, this meal is involved in the story. Well, Esther feeds Ahasuerus and Haman, but when the king at dinner asks what she wants, she simply asks that he and Haman come back before lunch the next day. We don't know exactly why her tactic is to delay for a day, but it allows the story to develop because Haman kind of gets puffed up by this experience. Here he is, the only guest at dinner with the king and the queen. And in the old saying that pride goeth before a fall, it kind of incites Haman to further action against Mordecai. Because he kind of goes out from the banquet. Once again, Mordecai doesn't bow down to him. And Haman decides he's going to build a gallows 75 feet tall in order to execute Mordecai. 75 feet. Overdoing it a bit, isn't he? So clearly he's going to make Mordecai a public example. Now the next morning he's going to go and ask the king for permission to kill Mordecai. And here we get one of these delightful, ironic turns in the story that are very common in Jewish folk tales. Overnight, the king can't sleep and gets up in the middle of the night and he realizes, Mordecai, who saved my life back here a little while ago, I haven't ever done anything to honor him. I need to do something about that. And so the next morning, Haman comes into court to ask the king if he can kill Mordecai. And before he gets a chance, here's what happens.